Kawhi Leonard has always been the guy who stayed quiet. No drama, no big speeches, no controversies. But now that silence is making everything worse because the FBI has officially opened an investigation into him. And it's not some small thing. We're talking about a $28 million fraud scandal connected to a company that completely fell apart. A company that promised to save the planet. A company that, on paper, made Kawhi a rich man without him ever lifting a finger. The whole thing came to light because of one piece of paper most people would have ignored. Back in March 2025, Aspiration, a so-called green bank that was supposed to fight climate change, filed for bankruptcy. Buried deep in the creditor list was a strange entry, KL2, Aspire LLC, owed $7 million. That's it, just a line in a court filing. But when journalists traced it, the initials were obvious. KL number 2, Leonard's jersey number, and the address, the exact same as his business manager's office. That tiny detail set everything off. Suddenly people were asking, why does Kawhi Leonard have a shell company getting paid millions from a bankrupt climate startup? And what did he actually do for the money? The answer, according to investigators, nothing. Not one commercial, not one Instagram post, not one public appearance. Zero, zero, zero for $28 million. And here's the crazy part, the contract was written that way on purpose. FBI agents and sports lawyers who've seen it said it looked more like a guaranteed paycheck than an endorsement. Kawhi had the right to turn down everything. He didn't have to show up anywhere, didn't have to post anything, didn't have to promote the brand at all. The only thing that really mattered in the contract was that he stayed employed by the Clippers. Why would a supposedly legit company do this? That's where things get darker. Aspiration wasn't just some random sponsor. It was backed by some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Robert Downey Jr. did the commercials. Leonardo DiCaprio was on the board. Drake talked about them in interviews. They raised almost $1 billion and were once valued at over $2 billion. Everyone thought they were about to change the world. But behind the scenes, almost everything was smoke and mirrors. Former employees later admitted the tree planting programs Aspiration bragged about were basically fake. Of all the hundreds of projects they claimed, only one was ever actually checked in person. So yeah, they were already running a scam, but even then, they still made Kawhi's contract a top priority. Even when they couldn't pay other bills, his payments always went out on time. Why? Because of who else was connected. Clippers owner Steve Ballmer wasn't just the richest owner in sports. He also happened to be one of Aspiration's biggest private investors. He poured tens of millions into the company right around the same time Kawhi's LLC popped up. The timeline is way too neat to be an accident. In September 2021, Ballmer broke ground on the Clippers' new arena and announced Aspiration as a founding partner. In November, Kawhi's LLC was registered. A few months later, the $28 million deal was signed. Former Aspiration insiders have already told investigators what they used to joke about behind closed doors, that Kawhi's deal wasn't marketing money at all. It was salary cap money, funneled through a green company to keep him in Los Angeles without technically breaking NBA rules. And now the FBI is tearing that entire arrangement apart. They're pulling emails, bank wires, even text messages between company execs. Because this isn't just about a failed climate brand anymore. It's about whether one of the NBA's biggest stars got illegal under the table payments. Kawhi hasn't said a word. His camp is completely silent, but the walls are closing in fast. And the deeper you look into this, the uglier it gets. Because this wasn't just bad luck. It looks like the entire thing was designed from the start. If part 1 was about how the cracks first showed, part 2 is where you see who really built this machine. And to understand that, you've got to look at one man, Steve Ballmer. This isn't just some random billionaire. Ballmer is worth over $100 billion. He's the richest owner in the NBA by a mile, and honestly, the kind of guy who could buy half the league and not even notice the dent in his bank account. But that kind of wealth comes with something else. Power. The kind of power where you don't just follow the rules, you bend them. Sometimes you break them and no one dares call you out. That's what makes the FBI investigation so dangerous for him. Because right now, the evidence looks like Ballmer didn't just invest in a climate company. He used that company as a conduit to quietly pay his best player outside the NBA's salary cap. Think about the timing for a second. August 2021. Kawhi signs a 4-year, $176 million extension with the Clippers. On paper, it's It's a max contract, exactly what the CBA allows, nothing shady. September 2021, Ballmer announces ground has broken on the Clippers' brand new arena, the Intuit Dome, a $2 billion palace he's building mostly out of his own pocket. That same month, he names Aspiration, the so-called Green Bank, as a founding partner in a $300 million sponsorship deal. November 2021, Kawhi's shell company, KL2 Aspire LLC, suddenly gets registered in California. April 2022, the $28 million contract goes live. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to see the threads here. Ballmer pours millions into Aspiration. Aspiration suddenly has the funds to hand Leonard a deal 4 times bigger than anything they gave Hollywood celebrities. And Kawhi doesn't have to do a single thing in return, except keep wearing a Clippers jersey. That's why insiders started calling Ballmer the architect of deception, the contract built to fail on purpose. Here's what investigators are really focused on: the clauses. The endorsement contract wasn't just light, it was written to be meaningless. Leonard could reject all requests for appearances. He had veto power over every piece of content. He was only obligated to show up in 5 organic social media posts per season. He never did even that. And then comes the real smoking gun, the termination clause. If Leonard stopped playing for the Clippers, the deal was automatically canceled. Read that again. His multi-million-dollar endorsement deal was tied directly to his employment with the team, not his image, not his reach, not his global brand, his status as a Clipper. That's what transforms this from lazy marketing into potential fraud, because it suggests the money wasn't for promoting Aspiration at all. It was for keeping Leonard tied to Ballmer's franchise, but off the books, how the money flowed. Now let's talk dollars. In December 2021, Ballmer made a $50 million personal investment into Aspiration through one of his private entities. At the same time, Oak Tree Capital and a few other firms put in around $250 million. That funding round bumped Aspiration's valuation to $2.3 billion. And what did Aspiration immediately do with that fresh cash? Among other things, they signed off on Leonard's massive $28 million contract. According to multiple former employees who have spoken under anonymity, Leonard's deal was internally referred to as Priority 1. Even when Aspiration couldn't pay vendors, even when employees' checks were late, Kawhi's payments went out first. Why? Because Ballmer wasn't just an investor, he was the investor. Without him, the company would have been underwater years earlier. Employees say they were even told bluntly that Leonard's deal existed to keep the relationship with the Clippers strong. In other words, Ballmer puts in money. Aspiration funnels money out to Leonard. Everyone wins until the company collapses and the FBI starts digging through the wreckage. The jokes that aren't funny anymore. Here's where it gets wild. Multiple Aspiration employees have admitted that internally they used to laugh about the whole setup. They literally called it salary cap money. One said in an interview, "Yeah, everyone knew. It was the worst kept secret in the office. But when your boss tells you it's important for our NBA relationship, you don't argue. You just process the payments." Another source said the contract was so obviously lopsided that they assumed it would never see daylight. After all, Kawhi never promoted the brand, so the public never even knew there was a deal. Unless you had the bankruptcy filings in front of you, there was no reason to suspect anything. But now that joke is Exhibit A in a federal case, the Arena connection. And don't forget the Arena. Ballmer positioned Aspiration as the official green partner of the Intuit Dome. Every press release bragged about how sustainable it would be. Carbon offsets, recycled water, solar-powered infrastructure, all verified by Aspiration. But when regulators later reviewed those sustainability claims, most of them turned out to be smoke and mirrors, just like the tree planting programs, just like the investor reports. The Intuit Dome was supposed to be Ballmer's legacy, but thanks to Aspiration, it may end up being a giant red flag. Ballmer's defense: of course, Ballmer insists he's innocent. His public line is that he was just another investor who got conned, that he had no idea what Aspiration's executives were doing, that he never knew about Leonard's contract. But the emails tell a different story. Investigators already have proof that Ballmer personally introduced Aspiration executives to other partners, bragged about their work in Clippers projects, and kept in close touch with the leadership team. He wasn't some passive investor, he was actively involved. And if his $50 million infusion directly enabled Leonard's secret payments, that could qualify as a round-trip funding scheme, a setup where an owner Ballmer funnels money into a partner company that then routes it back to his own player. That's not just an NBA violation, that's potential wire fraud. The stakes. If the FBI proves this case, the fallout will be brutal. For Leonard, it could mean not just a suspension, but permanent damage to his legacy. For Ballmer, it could mean fines, suspensions, even being forced to sell the Clippers. And for the league as a whole, it would trigger the harshest penalties since the Joe Smith scandal, but on a scale 10 times bigger. This isn't just about a bad contract. This is about whether one of the NBA's richest owners engineered a secret system to dodge the salary cap and funneled money to his star player through a company now under federal indictment. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't some sloppy accident. This was built because the architect of deception wasn't Leonard. It wasn't even Aspiration. It was the billionaire who thought he could design a perfect crime. By the time 2023 rolled around, the cracks weren't just showing anymore. They were ripping open. Aspiration, the company that was supposed to be planting trees and saving the planet, was falling apart from the inside. On paper, they were still valued at billions, but behind closed doors, it was panic. They had burned through almost $1 billion of investor money. The tree planting programs that made them famous, mostly fake. The verified carbon offsets, just numbers and spreadsheets. Even their partnerships, those celebrity-heavy announcements with DiCaprio, Drake, Robert Downey Jr. were shallow. But here's the wild part. Even as the company was drowning, Kawhi Leonard's checks never bounced. The priorities. Former employees who spoke to investigators described weekly finance meetings that became like triage sessions. Which vendors do we pay? Which bills can we delay? Who gets stiffed this week? And in every one of those meetings, according to multiple sources, there was one non-negotiable. Kawhi gets paid first. It didn't matter that employees were missing paychecks. It didn't matter that vendors were threatening lawsuits. The 7-figure installments to KL2 Aspire LLC went out on time, every time. One former executive put it bluntly, Kawhi was priority one, always. Even if the company fell tomorrow, his deal got honored. Why? Because Aspiration's leadership believed Leonard's contract wasn't just a marketing expense. It was the glue holding together their partnership with the Clippers and their billionaire owner. As long as Kawhi was happy, Ballmer was happy. And as long as Ballmer was happy, Aspiration's funding pipeline stayed open. Uncle Dennis. And then there's the role of Dennis Robertson, better known as Uncle Dennis, Leonard's longtime advisor, the man who's been in his corner since the very beginning. According to whistleblowers, whenever Aspiration hesitated on payments, Uncle Dennis would personally get on the phone. He wasn't subtle. Employees recall him demanding Kawhi's check better clear by Friday. One employee described those calls as priority overrides. No matter what else was going on, once Uncle Dennis called, everyone dropped what they were doing to push Leonard's payment through. It didn't matter that the company was collapsing around them. Leonard's money had to come first. The collapse. By late 2024, the company was circling the drain. Lawsuits were piling up, regulators were sniffing around, investors were furious, and internally, it was chaos. Aspiration's founders had made huge promises, millions of trees planted, billions in offsets sold, entire industries greened by their platform. But the truth uncovered by the SEC and later confirmed in court was brutal. Up to 90% of claimed deals were fake. Letters of intent from corporate partners were fabricated. Revenue was inflated by hundreds of millions. The environmental programs they bragged about didn't exist. By March 2025, they had no choice left. Aspiration filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and when that creditor list dropped, the world finally saw the bombshell. KL2 Aspire LLC owed $7 million. That's when journalists connected the dots, and that's when the FBI moved in. The FBI steps in. When federal agents look at fraud cases, they don't just chase headlines, they follow money, and the money trail here was screaming. Ballmer invests tens of millions into Aspiration. Aspiration immediately funnels $28 million into Leonard's shell company. Leonard never does a single ounce of promotional work. The contract automatically ends if he leaves the Clippers. That's not sponsorship, that's salary cap circumvention, and if prosecutors can prove intent, it could also be wire fraud. According to sources inside the investigation, the FBI subpoenaed Aspiration's internal emails, financial ledgers, and Slack messages. What they found painted a clear picture. Kawhi's contract was treated as an extension of the Clippers' payroll, disguised through green finance marketing money, and Ballmer's fingerprint fingerprints were everywhere. The panic in the league. Inside NBA offices, the mood has been described as panic. League executives know that salary cap circumvention is the one thing Adam Silver has called a cardinal sin. The last time a team got caught doing it, the Minnesota Timberwolves lost multiple first-round draft picks, were fined millions, and had contracts voided. But that was a side deal worth a few million. This is a $28 million pipeline tied directly to one of the league's richest owners and most high-profile players. If the allegations stick, the penalties will be devastating. The Clippers could lose multiple draft picks. Leonard's current contract could be voided. Ballmer could face suspension or even be forced to sell the team. And that's just the NBA side. The FBI doesn't care about basketball, they care about fraud. If prosecutors prove that money moved through Aspiration to secretly pay Leonard, the case becomes federal, and federal fraud charges can carry years in prison. Silence from Kawhi. And where is Kawhi through all of this? Silent, as always. No statements, no interviews, no comments from his camp. But silence isn't helping him anymore, because while he stays quiet, documents are screaming, contracts are screaming, former employees are testifying, regulators are digging. One former Aspiration accountant summed it up perfectly. We all knew. It wasn't marketing, it was payroll. And the feds know it too. The cliffhanger. By the time bankruptcy court revealed the final creditor list, the scandal was already too big to contain. The FBI's financial crimes unit was all over it. The NBA had opened its own parallel investigation, and reporters had thousands of pages of documents to comb through. But the most shocking details, they hadn't even come out yet. Because what investigators were about to uncover wasn't just fraud, it was how the richest owner in sports may have engineered a perfect loop. His money in, his star player paid out, and the league completely blind to it. That's not just shady, that's criminal engineering. And as the FBI tightens its grip, the question shifts from did this happen to who's going down for it? By now, the story wasn't just about Kawhi Leonard. It wasn't even just about Aspiration. What the FBI uncovered had the potential to reshape the entire NBA. And the fallout? It's only getting started, because here's the reality. When federal investigators step in, this isn't sports gossip anymore. This isn't just a scandal for Twitter to run wild with. This is criminal law, and the stakes are measured in indictments, fines, and possible prison time. The turning point, August 2025. That's when Joe Sandberg, one of Aspiration's founders, quietly entered a plea deal. Wire fraud, securities fraud, over $240 million stolen from investors. And in his allocution, the statement you give when you admit guilt, he dropped a bomb. He admitted that Aspiration had paid certain sports figures contracts that were designed for non-business purposes. He didn't say Leonard's name directly, but prosecutors didn't have to squint very hard to see who he meant. Within days, the FBI formally confirmed that Leonard's contract with Aspiration was part of an ongoing investigation into fraud and potential salary cap circumvention. That's when it stopped being whispers. Kawhi Leonard, the quietest superstar in the NBA, was officially under federal investigation. The NBA's worst nightmare. For the league, this is the doomsday scenario. The NBA is built on the principle of competitive balance. The salary cap is sacred. Every team has to play by the same financial rules, or the whole system collapses. Adam Silver has called salary cap circumvention a cardinal sin, and if this case proves true, then one of the league's richest owners and most important stars just committed it in broad daylight. The Timberwolves lost 5 first-round picks back in 2000 for a secret $86 million deal with Joe Smith. Imagine what the penalty looks like for a $28 million under-the-table scheme backed by a billionaire owner. League insiders are already talking about forfeiture of multiple first-round picks, voiding Leonard's contract, including his latest $153 million extension. Suspensions for Ballmer and Clippers executives, multi-million-dollar fines on top of whatever the feds bring down. One GM put it bluntly off the record: if they don't hammer the Clippers for this, every owner in the league is gonna find their own Aspiration and start hiding payroll. Ballmer's denials. Steve Ballmer hasn't gone quietly. He's been everywhere. Interviews, statements, pressers, repeating the same line. He was conned. He had no idea Aspiration was a fraud. He never knew about Kawhi's contract. I was tricked, Ballmer told ESPN. They conned me. They conned Kawhi. We were victims. But that defense has holes. Emails already in FBI hands show Ballmer personally introducing Aspiration execs to Clippers partners. He bragged about their shared vision for the Intuit Dome. He invested $50 million just weeks before Leonard's contract was finalized. Victim? Maybe. Architect? The evidence makes it hard to ignore. Kawhi's silence. And Leonard? He hasn't said a word, not a single comment. His camp refuses interviews. His uncle, Dennis Robertson, has gone dark too. But that silence is becoming its own problem. Fans are demanding answers. Media is tearing him apart. And investigators see silence not as strength, but as a shield. One former prosecutor told The Athletic, silence only works when you've got nothing to hide. If Kawhi has documents showing this was legit, now's the time to show them. Because if not, the feds will find the truth for him. The bigger picture. The scandal has already blown past basketball. Lawmakers are circling. Investor watchdogs are circling. Even other leagues are watching closely, terrified of what happens if one superstar's secret deal can unravel the entire credibility of a sport. And fans, they're furious. Social media has turned on Leonard. Memes, jokes, anger. It's everywhere. The man who built his image on being untouchable, on being above the noise, is now the face of one of the ugliest scandals in NBA history. What was once his greatest strength, his quiet mystery, has now become his greatest liability. The legacy question. This is the part that hurts most, because whether or not Kawhi Leonard ends up charged with a crime, his reputation will never be the same. Two-time Finals MVP. Defensive Player of the Year, and champion in San Antonio and Toronto. The man who broke up the Warriors dynasty. All of that now sits under a shadow. Asterisks don't go away, and if the FBI finds enough to indict him, his entire career could be rewritten as the story of the superstar who scammed the system and got caught. Ballmer's future is just as uncertain. Billionaires don't go to jail often, but even billionaires can be forced out. If the league decides he crossed the line, selling the Clippers might not be his choice. It might be the only option left. The last line of the bankruptcy filing showed it all. KL2 Aspire LLC, $7 million unpaid. The shell company that cracked open a $1 billion fraud, a federal investigation, and possibly the biggest punishment the NBA has ever handed down. And as of right now, the FBI isn't slowing down. The NBA isn't slowing down. The story is only getting bigger. What started with trees could end with suspensions, voided contracts, billion-dollar franchises changing hands, and a Hall of Famer's legacy shattered. The question isn't if someone's going down. The only question left is who falls first.